Ma'am, thank you for remaining cooperative. We'll sort everything out at the courthouse.
I understand, officer. I'll answer every question there.
Thank you. Let's head to the vehicle.
Of course.
Good morning. It's wonderful to see you again.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me.
We're looking forward to today's discussion.
So am I.
Everything is ready whenever you'd like to begin. Thank you for taking the time to review everything carefully.
I appreciate the opportunity to discuss it together.
I believe clear communication helps everyone move forward.
Do you know who you're talking to? Officer Daniel Carter didn't shout. He didn't have to. The confidence in his voice carried farther than anger ever could. The busy intersection in downtown Chicago seemed to pause for a brief moment as morning commuters slowed their pace, curious enough to glance toward the growing conversation, but careful not to become part of it. Traffic lights cycled from red to green. Taxi horns echoed between the towering office buildings. Steam drifted from a nearby subway vent, disappearing into the cool autumn air. Daniel stood beside his patrol car, one hand resting comfortably on his duty belt. His polished badge caught the early morning sunlight. After 15 years on the force, he had grown accustomed to people immediately changing their tone the moment they saw the uniform. Most apologized. Most complied. Most never questioned him. Across from him stood a woman who appeared remarkably calm. She looked to be in her early 40s. Her dark curls were neatly gathered into a low bun beneath the collar of a tailored charcoal gray coat. She carried a simple black leather briefcase in one hand. No expensive jewelry. No designer handbag. Nothing about her appearance suggested wealth or influence. She looked like another professional walking to work. Daniel had stopped her moments earlier after believing she had entered a restricted traffic lane while driving through downtown construction. Before she could fully explain what had happened, he had already begun writing multiple citations. The woman quietly watched him finish. When he finally handed her the paperwork, she accepted it without complaint. "Officer." Her voice was calm and measured. "I believe there may have been a misunderstanding." Daniel barely looked up. "The evidence says otherwise." She glanced toward the nearby traffic signs. The construction detour directed vehicles into that lane. Daniel folded his ticket book closed. "If you disagree, you can explain it to the judge." Several pedestrians slowed as they passed. A young man carrying coffee whispered to his coworker. "That officer seems pretty sure of himself." His friend shrugged. "Most of them are." The woman looked back at Daniel. She wasn't offended. She wasn't frightened. She simply studied him for a quiet moment. "May I ask something?" Daniel nodded impatiently. "What?" "When did you review the temporary traffic order issued this morning?" For the first time, Daniel hesitated. "Only briefly. I don't need a traffic order. I know the area." The woman offered a polite smile. "I understand." But the detour changed at 6 o'clock. Daniel's expression hardened. "I've already made my decision. The conversation is over." Without another word, he turned toward his patrol car. The woman remained standing where she was. She looked once more toward the temporary construction signs that workers had installed only hours earlier. Then she carefully folded the citations and placed them inside her briefcase. As she closed it, a construction supervisor hurried across the street. "Excuse me, officer." Daniel looked over. "Yes, I think she's right. We redirected traffic before sunrise." Daniel glanced toward the worker. "Then your signs aren't clear enough." The supervisor opened his mouth to respond, then quietly stopped. He had seen this before. Arguing would accomplish nothing. The woman thanked the construction supervisor with a gentle nod. "It's all right." She turned back toward Daniel. For the first time, he looked directly into her eyes. There was no anger waiting there, only quiet certainty. She extended her hand. "My name is Maya Johnson." Daniel didn't shake it. He simply nodded. "Officer Carter." She smiled politely. "Thank you for your time." Daniel assumed the conversation had ended. So did everyone watching. Maya adjusted the strap of her briefcase before taking a few steps toward the courthouse visible at the end of the block. Then she stopped. She turned back one final time. Her expression remained calm, almost kind. "I'll see you in court, Officer Carter." Daniel couldn't help but smile. It was the confident smile of a man who believed the courtroom would be just another place where his badge carried more weight than anyone else's words. He watched Maya disappear into the crowd of attorneys, clerks, and office workers crossing the plaza. He never noticed the bronze courthouse seal mounted above the entrance. He never wondered why she was walking there instead of returning to her car. And he certainly never imagined that before the week was over, the quiet woman carrying the black briefcase would be standing inside that very courthouse, not as another defendant, but as the one asking the questions. The courthouse stood quietly beneath the pale Chicago morning sky. Its limestone columns had witnessed decades of arguments, verdicts, apologies, and second chances. Lawyers hurried through the front entrance carrying heavy case files, while clerks balanced cups of coffee and greeted one another by name. Among them walked Maya Johnson. She moved without urgency. Her charcoal gray coat rested neatly over a navy business suit, and the same black leather briefcase swung gently at her side. She wasn't accompanied by assistants, investigators, or security personnel. She preferred arriving alone. The security officer at the courthouse entrance smiled as she approached. "Good morning, Ms. Johnson." "Morning, Tom. Busy day?" She smiled warmly. "They all seem to be." Tom chuckled as he scanned her briefcase. "Good luck in court." "Thank you." She continued through the marble hallway, nodding politely to janitors, reception clerks, and young attorneys rushing toward morning hearings. She greeted each person exactly the same way. Not because she had to. Because she believed every profession deserved the same respect. One of the courthouse interns hurried after her. "Miss Johnson." She turned immediately. The young woman looked nervous. "I'm sorry to bother you. I had a question about yesterday's filing." Maya smiled. "Walk with me." As they moved through the hallway, the intern opened a thick folder. "I wasn't sure whether the supplemental affidavit should be attached before the witness certification." Maya looked over the documents carefully. "You were right to ask." She gently rearranged the pages. "The certification always comes first." The intern sighed with relief. "I was afraid I'd made a mistake." Maya handed back the folder. "Mistakes aren't the problem. Not asking questions is." The young woman smiled gratefully. "Thank you." As Maya continued walking, another attorney joined her. "Morning, Maya." "Morning, David. I heard you've accepted the appointment." She nodded. "Last week." David smiled. "Congratulations. Special Prosecutor isn't exactly a small responsibility." Maya laughed softly. "Neither is getting the paperwork right." They both smiled. Before parting ways outside Courtroom 7, a brass plaque beside the wooden doors read, "Special Prosecutor's Office." Maya paused only long enough to straighten a stack of files inside her briefcase. Among them rested the traffic citations Officer Daniel Carter had handed her the previous morning. She glanced at the top page, then quietly placed it beneath several other case files. Not because it was unimportant, because it wasn't personal. Justice, she had learned years ago, worked best when emotion never led the conversation. Inside her office, framed photographs lined one bookshelf. One showed Maya standing beside her father wearing his maintenance uniform. Another captured her law school graduation. A third showed dozens of neighborhood children participating in a free legal education workshop she organized every summer. No photographs displayed awards. No newspaper headlines celebrated courtroom victories. Visitors often found that surprising. Her assistant, Emily, entered carrying the morning schedule. "You've got 3 hearings before lunch." Maya accepted the folder. "And this afternoon?" Emily smiled. "The police accountability review." Maya nodded thoughtfully. "Good." Emily hesitated. "I also noticed something." "What?" She handed Maya a printed docket. "Your traffic citation hearing was assigned to Judge Helen Morris." Maya looked at the schedule without changing expression. "I saw." Emily studied her face. "Are you going to request reassignment?" Maya gently shook her head. "Why would I?" "Because." Emily lowered her voice. "The officer doesn't know who you are." Maya smiled. "That's true. But today isn't about introducing myself." She closed the folder. "It's about allowing the process to work exactly as it should." Emily smiled quietly. One reason people admired Maya wasn't because she won difficult cases. It was because she trusted institutions enough to let truth reveal itself. She never sought advantage, only fairness. Outside her office window, the courthouse plaza slowly filled with attorneys, officers, witnesses, and ordinary citizens beginning another day inside the justice system. Each person entered carrying a different story. Each hoped to be heard. Maya picked up her briefcase. As she walked toward the courtroom, she remembered Officer Carter's confident smile from the day before. She felt no resentment, no desire to embarrass him. Only one quiet thought stayed with her. Sometimes the most important lesson in a courtroom wasn't about who spoke the loudest. It was about who was willing to listen before judgment was passed. Officer Daniel Carter parked his patrol car behind the 7th District Precinct just as the morning briefing was ending. The familiar sounds of police life surrounded him. Dispatch radios crackled from the communications room. Coffee brewed in the break area. Officers laughed quietly as they prepared for another shift across downtown Chicago. For Daniel, it all felt routine, predictable, comfortable. He hung his patrol cap on the locker door and began polishing the silver badge pinned neatly above his uniform pocket. 15 years. More than 3,000 traffic stops. Hundreds of arrests. 2 commendations for bravery. A department award for professionalism. The badge represented everything he had worked for. Lately, however, it had begun representing something else. Certainty. The kind that slowly convinced a person they rarely needed to question themselves. Morning, Carter. Officer Michael Reynolds walked into the locker room carrying a cup of coffee. Morning. Michael noticed the stack of paperwork sitting inside Daniel's locker. Looks like you had another busy shift. Daniel shrugged. Nothing unusual. Just another driver arguing about a citation. Michael laughed. There's always one. Daniel smiled confidently. This one actually told me she'd see me in court. Michael grinned. Good luck to her. Daniel chuckled. I'll be there. The conversation ended as Captain Robert Hayes entered the room. Unlike most supervisors, Hayes rarely raised his voice. He didn't have to. His reputation for fairness earned attention long before he spoke. Morning, gentlemen. The officers greeted him respectfully. Hayes placed a folder on the briefing table. I've reviewed yesterday's incident reports. Daniel looked up. No issues? The captain hesitated for just a moment. One question. He opened the folder. The construction detour on Madison Avenue. Daniel nodded. What about it? Hayes looked directly at him. Did you confirm the updated traffic order before issuing citations? Daniel answered almost immediately. I know that intersection. Hayes remained calm. That wasn't my question. Silence settled briefly across the locker room. Daniel shifted slightly. I didn't need to. The driver entered a restricted lane. Captain Hayes slowly closed the folder. The city changed the traffic pattern at 6 yesterday morning. Daniel frowned. No one informed us. They emailed every patrol supervisor. The captain's voice remained steady. I just wanted to make sure everyone reviews temporary orders before making enforcement decisions. Daniel crossed his arms. I've worked that district for years. I know those streets better than any construction crew. Hayes studied him quietly. Years earlier, Daniel would have accepted the reminder without hesitation. Now, he defended his assumptions before examining the facts. The captain finally nodded. Just be careful. Experience is valuable. But experience isn't the same as certainty. Daniel offered a polite nod. I understand. Hayes wasn't completely convinced. As he walked away, Michael leaned closer. You all right? Daniel shrugged. Captain worries too much. Michael smiled uncertainly. Maybe. After the morning briefing, Daniel climbed back into his patrol car. The city slowly awakened around him. Office workers filled the sidewalks. School buses rolled through intersections. Construction crews continued redirecting traffic with temporary signs. As he passed the same intersection from yesterday, Daniel noticed something. Fresh orange arrows pointed drivers into the exact lane Maya Johnson had used. He slowed. For a brief second, an uncomfortable thought crossed his mind. Had she been right? He quickly pushed the idea away. One sign didn't change everything. His report had already been filed. His testimony would be straightforward. Besides, judges trusted officers. They always had. The department's legal liaison had already informed him that the citation hearing would take place on Friday morning. Routine. Simple. Another appearance before returning to patrol. He wasn't worried. Across town, Maya Johnson sat quietly inside her office reviewing legal files beneath the warm glow of a desk lamp. The citation rested neatly on top of one folder. She wasn't preparing for an argument. She was preparing for the truth. Meanwhile, Daniel continued driving through the city, completely unaware that the hearing he considered insignificant would soon become the most important courtroom appearance of his career. Not because his badge would be questioned, but because, for the first time in many years, he would be forced to question himself. Friday morning arrived beneath a gray Chicago sky. A light rain covered the courthouse steps, leaving the old limestone building glistening beneath the soft autumn light. Lawyers hurried through the revolving doors with briefcases tucked beneath their coats. Reporters waited outside another courtroom covering an unrelated high-profile hearing. Inside courtroom 7, however, the atmosphere was quiet, almost ordinary. Officer Daniel Carter entered through the side hallway carrying a slim case file beneath his arm. He looked relaxed. Routine traffic hearings had become almost automatic after 15 years in uniform. He greeted the bailiff with a smile. "Morning. Morning, officer." Daniel nodded politely before taking a seat near the front of the courtroom reserved for law enforcement. Several officers from neighboring precincts were already there, waiting for unrelated cases. One leaned over. "You done before lunch?" Daniel smiled. "Probably. Just a traffic citation." His colleague laughed. "Easiest part of the week." Daniel agreed. "So far." He leaned comfortably against the wooden bench, occasionally checking his watch. He wasn't nervous. Why would he be? His report had already been filed. His testimony would be straightforward. Another judge. Another hearing. Another ordinary morning. Across the hallway, Maya Johnson quietly walked toward the courtroom carrying the same black leather briefcase she had carried all week. She wore a tailored navy suit beneath her charcoal coat. Her hair remained neatly tied into a low bun. Simple pearl earrings reflected the hallway lights as courthouse employees greeted her warmly. "Good morning, Ms. Johnson." "Morning." A young clerk smiled as she passed. "We've prepared everything for today's calendar." "Thank you." She continued toward the courtroom with the same calm pace she carried into every hearing. No dramatic entrance. No audience. No announcement. Just another attorney beginning another day of work. As Maya entered courtroom 7, several attorneys looked up and offered respectful nods. Daniel noticed. At first, he assumed she was simply another experienced lawyer. Then something unexpected happened. The courtroom clerk immediately stood. "Good morning, Ms. Johnson. The judge asked me to let you know your files are already on the bench." "Thank you." Daniel watched quietly. Another attorney approached Maya. "Congratulations on your appointment." She smiled. "I appreciate that." The attorney lowered his voice. "The department's been speaking highly of your work." Daniel frowned slightly. "Appointment? Department?" Before he could think further, the courtroom doors opened again. Judge Helen Morris entered. Everyone stood. "Good morning. Please be seated." The judge arranged several files before looking toward the clerk. "Let's begin." Routine cases moved quickly. Parking violations. License disputes. Administrative hearings. One after another. Daniel remained completely at ease. Finally, the clerk called the next matter. City of Chicago versus Maya Johnson. Daniel stood automatically. He adjusted his uniform and stepped toward the witness area. Then he noticed something unusual. Maya wasn't walking toward the defendant's table. Instead, she calmly approached the counsel table reserved for the prosecution. Daniel stopped walking. For the first time that morning, his confidence faltered. Judge Morris looked up with a warm smile. "Good morning, Ms. Johnson." "Good morning, Your Honor. Congratulations on your recent appointment as Special Prosecutor." "Thank you, Your Honor. I appreciate the opportunity to serve." Daniel felt the courtroom grow strangely quiet around him. Several attorneys glanced toward him. Not mockingly. Simply curiously. Judge Morris looked down at the case file. Officer Carter. I understand this matter involves citations issued earlier this week. Yes, Your Honor. The judge nodded. Very well. She turned toward Maya. Miss Johnson, are you prepared to proceed? Maya stood calmly. I am, Your Honor. She opened her briefcase and removed several neatly organized folders. Body camera footage. Traffic control orders. Construction permits. Official city notifications. Witness statements. Each document rested carefully labeled before her. Daniel stared at the growing stack of evidence. The hearing suddenly no longer felt routine. He remembered Maya's calm voice from the intersection. Asterisk, the detour changed at 6 o'clock. Asterisk, he remembered the construction supervisor trying to explain. He remembered choosing not to listen. Judge Morris adjusted her glasses. Very well. Let's begin with the facts. The words echoed softly through the silent courtroom. Daniel instinctively touched the polished badge resting against his chest. For years, it had given him confidence. Today, for the first time, he realized confidence would not answer the questions waiting on the judge's bench. Only the truth would. The courtroom settled into complete silence. Judge Helen Morris adjusted her reading glasses and looked down at the file resting before her. Miss Johnson, she said calmly, you may proceed. Maya stood. She didn't rush. She didn't dramatize the moment. She simply carried a thin folder to the lectern, placing it carefully beside a laptop already connected to the courtroom monitors. Thank you, Your Honor. She glanced briefly toward Officer Daniel Carter before returning her attention to the judge. This hearing concerns several traffic citations issued on Monday morning near the Madison Avenue construction zone. Judge Morris nodded. Please continue. Maya pressed a single key. A city traffic map appeared on the courtroom screens. Red and orange lines marked temporary lane changes approved by the Department of Transportation. This is the official traffic control order that became effective at 6 o'clock Monday morning. She handed a certified copy to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. The order redirected civilian traffic into the lane where Officer Carter later issued the citations. Daniel remained standing at the witness table. His expression stayed professional, but he felt a slight tightening in his chest. Maya continued without changing her tone. The document was distributed electronically to every district supervisor at 5:42 a.m. Judge Morris quietly reviewed the paperwork. I see the distribution record. Maya nodded. Yes, Your Honor. She turned toward Daniel. Officer Carter, may I ask you a few questions? Daniel answered confidently. Yes. You've served with the Chicago Police Department for 15 years? I have. You've worked traffic enforcement for much of that time? Yes. You testified that you believed the restricted lane remained closed. Correct. Maya nodded respectfully. Before issuing the citations, did you verify whether the temporary traffic order had changed that morning? Daniel hesitated. Not specifically. You relied on your previous knowledge of the intersection? Yes. Maya paused for only a second. So your decision was based on what you believed the traffic pattern was, rather than the updated order issued that morning. The courtroom remained perfectly still. Daniel answered honestly. Yes. Maya didn't react. She simply acknowledged the response. Thank you. She clicked to the next screen. Body camera footage began playing. The courtroom watched quietly. The video showed the traffic stop exactly as it had happened. Maya calmly explaining the detour, the construction signs, the temporary lane markings. Then, the construction supervisor approaching. The supervisor's voice echoed through the speakers. Officer, I think she's right. We redirected traffic before sunrise. The footage continued. Daniel's recorded response followed. Then your signs aren't clear enough. The screen went dark. No one spoke. Judge Morris folded her hands. Officer Carter, did you request verification from dispatch after the construction supervisor raised that concern? Daniel lowered his eyes briefly. No, Your Honor. Did you contact the Department of Transportation? No. Did you delay issuing the citations until the traffic order could be confirmed? No. The judge quietly made several notes. Across the courtroom, a few younger officers watched without moving. None of them looked embarrassed. They looked thoughtful. Maya returned to the lectern. I'd like to submit one additional exhibit. She placed another document before the judge. This is the city's construction log. It confirms that the detour signs visible in Officer Carter's body camera footage were installed at 5:57 a.m., 3 minutes before the new traffic order became effective. Judge Morris reviewed the document carefully. Everything matched. Dates, times, locations. Nothing was disputed. Maya looked toward Daniel once more. Her expression remained composed. There was no satisfaction in proving him wrong. Only professionalism. Officer Carter, when I told you at the scene that the traffic pattern had changed, did you believe me? Daniel didn't answer immediately. The silence lasted several long seconds. Finally, he spoke. No. Maya nodded gently. May I ask why? Daniel looked down at the polished badge on his uniform. For years, it had reminded him of responsibility. Somewhere along the way, he had allowed it to become certainty. He slowly raised his eyes. I believed I already knew. No one in the courtroom moved. Judge Morris quietly closed the evidence file. The facts were no longer in dispute. For the first time that morning, Officer Daniel Carter realized he wasn't standing before the court because someone wanted to defeat him. He was standing there because the truth had patiently waited until everyone was finally willing to hear it. The courtroom remained silent long after Officer Daniel Carter admitted the words that had changed everything. I believed I already knew. No one whispered. No one shifted in their seat. Even the quiet scratching of courtroom clerks taking notes seemed to disappear beneath the weight of that simple sentence. Judge Helen Morris rested her hands together on the bench. She had presided over hundreds of hearings during her 27 years on the bench. Some were loud. Some were emotional. But she had learned that the most important moments were often the quietest. This was one of them. She looked toward Maya Johnson. Miss Johnson, do you have anything further? Maya slowly stood. She gathered her notes, but left the thick stack of evidence untouched. She had no need to repeat what had already been proven. Only one final statement, Your Honor. The judge nodded. You may proceed. Maya stepped toward the center of the courtroom. She didn't face Daniel immediately. Instead, she looked around the room. Young law students occupied the back row. Several police officers waited for their own hearings. Court clerks paused from organizing files. Even members of the public quietly watched. This case is not about a traffic citation. Her voice remained calm. It is not about winning an argument. It is not about embarrassing an officer. She paused. It is about something much larger. The courtroom remained completely still. A badge represents public trust. It gives authority. It gives responsibility. But it never replaces the obligation to keep listening. Daniel lowered his eyes. Every word felt directed toward the profession he had once believed he understood completely. Maya continued. The law was never created to protect pride. It exists to protect fairness. She turned toward Daniel for the first time. Officer Carter, when we met on Madison Avenue, I wasn't asking for special treatment. I was asking for the same opportunity every citizen deserves. To be heard. Daniel quietly nodded. He understood now. Not because the courtroom had forced him to, because the evidence had removed every excuse he had been hiding behind. Judge Morris watched both of them carefully. She had expected frustration, perhaps even resentment. Instead, she saw two professionals standing inside the same courtroom with one shared goal: finding the truth. The judge finally spoke. The court appreciates the professionalism shown by both parties. She looked toward Daniel. Officer Carter, experience is one of law enforcement's greatest strengths. She paused. But experience must always remain open to new facts. Daniel answered quietly. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Morris turned toward Maya. And Ms. Johnson. The court appreciates the respectful manner in which these proceedings have been conducted. Maya nodded. Thank you, Your Honor. The judge reviewed the final page of the case. Based upon the evidence presented, the citations issued on Monday are dismissed. Her gavel touched the bench once. Softly. Not as a punishment. As a conclusion. Daniel closed his eyes for only a brief second. He wasn't upset by the ruling. He knew it was correct. What unsettled him was realizing how easily the entire situation could have been avoided. One question. One phone call. One moment of listening. That was all it would have taken. As the courtroom slowly began preparing for the next hearing, Maya quietly organized her folders. She carefully placed each document back inside her briefcase exactly as she always did. No celebration. No expression of victory. Justice, she believed, should never feel like someone's defeat. Daniel remained standing near the witness table. Watching. Thinking. Captain Robert Hayes had once told every rookie officer in the academy, "Confidence helps you make decisions. Humility helps you correct them." For years, Daniel remembered only the first sentence. Today, he finally understood the second. Maya closed her briefcase and prepared to leave the courtroom. Before reaching the aisle, she paused for just a moment. She looked toward the rows of young law students quietly observing the hearing. Then she spoke one final sentence. Justice becomes stronger every time someone chooses truth over pride. The students quietly nodded. So did several officers seated near the back. If this moment touched your heart, remember that real strength is never found in authority alone. It is found in the courage to listen, to learn, and to choose integrity even when admitting a mistake is difficult. Share this story with someone who believes that humility is one of the greatest forms of leadership. Outside the courthouse windows, the rain had stopped. For the first time that morning, sunlight began breaking through the clouds. The courtroom slowly emptied after Judge Helen Morris concluded the hearing. Attorneys gathered their files. Court clerks prepared the docket for the next session. The quiet echo of footsteps replaced the tension that had filled the room only minutes earlier. Officer Daniel Carter remained standing beside the witness chair. His uniform looked exactly the same. His badge still reflected the afternoon sunlight streaming through the courthouse windows. Yet somehow, it felt different. Not because it had lost its meaning. Because he had finally remembered what it was supposed to represent. Across the courtroom, Maya Johnson carefully organized the documents inside her black leather briefcase. Every folder returned to its proper place. Every page aligned neatly. She treated a dismissed traffic citation with the same care she gave the most complicated cases. Justice, she believed, deserved consistency. As she prepared to leave, she heard quiet footsteps approaching behind her. "Miss Johnson." She turned. Daniel stood several feet away. His patrol cap rested in his hands instead of on his head. For the first time since they had met at the intersection, he looked uncertain. "I was hoping I could speak with you." Maya smiled politely. "Of course." The hallway outside the courtroom had become almost empty. Sunlight filtered through tall courthouse windows, stretching long patterns across the polished stone floor. Neither of them spoke immediately. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "When you told me we'd meet in court, I thought you were angry." Maya shook her head gently. "I wasn't. I simply trusted the process." Daniel nodded slowly. "I understand that now." He looked down at the badge pinned to his uniform. "I've been thinking about something ever since the hearing ended." Maya waited patiently. "I spent 15 years believing experience meant I already had the answers." He smiled sadly. "But somewhere along the way, I stopped asking questions." His voice carried no defensiveness. Only honesty. "I owe you an apology." He looked directly at her. "Not because I lost today's case." He paused. "Because I stopped listening before I understood what you were trying to tell me." The hallway became quiet again. Maya studied him for a moment. She had heard many apologies throughout her career. Some were offered to protect reputations. Others were spoken because circumstances demanded them. This one felt different. It carried no excuses, only responsibility. She smiled warmly. "Thank you." Daniel exhaled slowly. "I don't expect you to forget what happened." Maya shook her head. "I won't." Daniel's shoulders lowered slightly. "I figured. But I hope." One mistake won't define the rest of my career. Maya looked through the courthouse window toward the busy plaza below. People crossed the street carrying briefcases, backpacks, grocery bags, and coffee cups. Every person was different. Yet every one of them hoped to be treated fairly. She turned back toward Daniel. "Do you know why I accepted your apology?" He shook his head. "Because accountability isn't about proving someone is a bad person. It's about giving someone the opportunity to become a better one." Daniel remained silent. Those words settled deeply. Maya continued. "I've argued cases against people who never admitted they were wrong. They defended every decision. They blamed everyone else." She smiled gently. "You didn't. You accepted responsibility. And that's where real change begins." Daniel looked at the floor for a moment before quietly laughing. "You know, when I graduated from the academy, our instructor told us the public would remember how we treated them long after they forgot our names." He looked back at Maya. "I understood those words back then. I just forgot to live them." Maya nodded. "It happens. The important part is remembering before it's too late." Just then, Captain Robert Hayes walked down the hallway carrying a case folder. He noticed both of them talking and slowed his pace. Daniel turned toward him. "Captain, I'd like to request something." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" "I'd like to help with the department's new recruit training." Hayes looked surprised. "You already volunteer for firearms instruction." Daniel nodded. "I'd like to teach something different." "What?" Daniel glanced briefly toward Maya before answering. "Listening." Captain Hayes smiled quietly. "I think that's a lesson every officer needs." Maya picked up her briefcase and prepared to leave. Before walking away, she extended her hand. This time, Daniel accepted it immediately. Neither spoke another word. The handshake lasted only a few seconds. Yet somehow, it carried more respect than either of them could have expressed through 100 conversations. Outside, the afternoon sunlight illuminated the courthouse steps. Inside, two professionals walked away in different directions. One carrying a briefcase, the other wearing a badge. Both understanding that true justice had never been about defeating another person. It had always been about becoming worthy of the responsibility they carried. 6 months passed. Winter had quietly surrendered to spring, and Chicago's streets once again filled with commuters, cyclists, and families enjoying the warmer mornings. Officer Daniel Carter still reported for duty before sunrise. He still polished his badge every morning. He still parked his patrol car in the same space behind the 7th District Precinct. From the outside, very little had changed. But everyone inside the department noticed something different. Daniel no longer rushed through conversations. He no longer assumed he already knew the answer. Every traffic stop began with the same simple sentence. "Good morning. Tell me what happened." The change was subtle, yet remarkably powerful. On a Monday morning, the police academy welcomed its newest class of recruits. 24 young officers sat inside a modern training room wearing crisp blue uniforms that still carried the excitement of new beginnings. Captain Robert Hayes stepped to the front of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, our next instructor has served this department for over 15 years. He smiled. "But today he isn't here to teach defensive tactics. He isn't here to teach firearms. He isn't even here to teach traffic enforcement." Hayes looked toward the doorway. "Today he's here to teach something even more important." Officer Daniel Carter walked into the classroom carrying only a notebook. No presentation slides. No awards. No photographs. Just a notebook. The recruits applauded politely. Daniel smiled modestly. "Thank you." He waited until the room became quiet. "I've made mistakes." The recruits looked at one another. That wasn't the introduction they expected. Daniel continued. "I used to believe experience meant I rarely needed to ask questions." He looked around the classroom. "I was wrong." The room remained completely silent. He drew a small circle on the whiteboard. Inside it, he wrote one word. "Listen." Then he turned back toward the recruits. "The most dangerous phrase an officer can say is 'I already know.'" Several recruits immediately began writing notes. Daniel smiled. "I know because I once believed it." He spent the next hour describing practical situations. traffic stops, neighborhood disputes, witness interviews, domestic calls. Every example ended with the same lesson. Pause. Listen. Verify. Respect. Authority should never replace curiosity. Near the end of the session, one young recruit raised her hand. Officer Carter, if someone challenges your decision, doesn't that weaken your authority? Daniel smiled. It depends. On what? He looked around the room before answering. If the challenge helps you discover the truth, then listening doesn't weaken authority. It strengthens it. The classroom became quiet again. At that moment, Captain Hayes quietly opened the back door. Standing beside him was Maya Johnson. She had been invited to speak at the Academy's Community Partnership Program later that afternoon. Daniel hadn't known she would be there. The recruits immediately recognized her from legal ethics seminars. Hayes smiled. I thought your class might enjoy meeting today's second instructor. Daniel turned. For just a moment, both he and Maya smiled. No surprise. No awkwardness. Only mutual respect. Hayes invited Maya to the front of the room. She stood beside Daniel. I don't usually begin with legal procedures. She looked toward the recruits. I begin with people. She smiled warmly. The law exists to serve people. So do police officers. Daniel nodded. And neither works well without trust. Maya looked at him briefly before facing the recruits again. I've argued many difficult cases, but one of the most meaningful lessons I've witnessed was watching someone choose growth instead of pride. Several recruits looked from Maya to Daniel. Neither explained further. They didn't need to. The lesson spoke for itself. As the training session ended, every recruit stood and applauded. Not because they had heard dramatic stories, because they had seen something much rarer. Two professionals, once divided by misunderstanding, now united by purpose. Before leaving the room, Maya turned toward the class one final time. If this story touched your heart, remember that justice begins long before a courtroom. It begins in every conversation where someone chooses to listen. Before making assumptions, share this story with someone who believes respect is the strongest foundation for both leadership and service. Outside the academy windows, young officers began practicing drill formations beneath the bright spring sun. Inside, a new generation had learned that the strongest badge was never the one worn on a uniform. It was the integrity carried within the person wearing it. 1 year later, the morning sun rose over downtown Chicago, painting the glass towers in warm shades of gold as the city slowly came to life. Traffic flowed steadily through the same intersection on Madison Avenue, where everything had begun. The orange construction barriers were long gone. Fresh white lane markings stretched across clean asphalt. Most drivers passed through without giving the intersection a second thought. Officer Daniel Carter did. Every time. He had requested this patrol route again. Not because he wanted to revisit a mistake. Because he wanted to remember the lesson it had taught him. His patrol car rolled quietly to a stop at a red light. A young officer driving another cruiser pulled alongside him. Officer Ethan Miller. Only 6 months out of the academy. Daniel lowered his window. Morning. Ethan smiled. Morning, Officer Carter. You heading toward the courthouse? Daniel nodded. I've got a community outreach meeting. The light turned green. The two patrol cars continued through the intersection together. 20 minutes later, Daniel parked outside the Richard J. Daley Center. The courthouse steps looked exactly as they had 1 year earlier. Lawyers hurried inside carrying briefcases. Families waited quietly beneath the stone columns. Court officers greeted familiar faces with polite smiles. Daniel climbed the stairs carrying nothing except a small notebook. The same notebook he now used during recruit training. Inside were no tactical notes. No enforcement statistics. Only lessons. Small reminders written after difficult days. One page simply read, ask one more question. Another said, listening saves more than arguments ever will. As Daniel entered the courthouse lobby, he noticed someone standing near the security checkpoint. Maya Johnson. She wore the same simple navy suit she had favored for years. Her black leather briefcase rested comfortably beside her. Nothing about her appearance suggested the hundreds of important cases she had handled. She noticed Daniel and smiled. "Good morning, officer." Daniel returned the smile. "Good morning, Ms. Johnson." Neither mentioned the traffic stop. Neither mentioned the courtroom. Some stories no longer needed retelling. They walked toward the elevators together. A nervous young woman approached the courthouse information desk carrying a folder of legal documents. She looked overwhelmed. I'm sorry. I'm not sure which courtroom I'm supposed to find." Before the clerk could answer, Daniel stepped forward. "May I see your paperwork?" She handed him the folder with trembling hands. He looked at the schedule. Courtroom 12. He smiled reassuringly. "I'll show you the way." The young woman's shoulders relaxed immediately. "Thank you. I've never been here before." Daniel nodded. "Most people haven't. That can make the building feel intimidating." Maya quietly watched the conversation. She remembered another morning, another intersection, another officer. How much could change in a single year? When they reached the courtroom hallway, the young woman smiled gratefully. "I was afraid I'd get lost." Daniel chuckled. "Everyone needs directions sometimes." She thanked him again before disappearing into the courtroom. Maya looked toward Daniel. "You've become a very good teacher." Daniel smiled modestly. "I'm still learning." She nodded. "So am I." Just then, Captain Robert Hayes joined them. He carried a folder containing this year's Academy graduation program. Perfect timing. He handed one copy to each of them. "I'd like both of you to speak to the graduating class this afternoon." Daniel looked surprised. "Together?" Hayes smiled. "I can't think of two better people." Maya laughed softly. "Neither can I." That afternoon, dozens of new officers stood proudly beneath bright academy lights, waiting to receive their badges. Daniel looked across the room at the faces filled with excitement, hope, responsibility. He remembered feeling exactly the same 15 years earlier. When his turn came to speak, he didn't talk about commendations. He didn't mention difficult arrests. He simply held up his badge. "This will open doors." He paused. "But your character will decide what happens after you walk through them." The room became silent. Maya stepped beside him. She looked at the new officers with quiet warmth. "And never forget. The people you meet won't remember the shine on your badge. They'll remember how you made them feel." No applause followed immediately. Only thoughtful silence. The kind that stays with people long after the words have ended. Outside, the afternoon breeze gently moved the American flag above the academy. Inside, a new generation of officers pinned badges onto their uniforms, not as symbols of power, but as promises of service. Daniel glanced toward Maya one final time. She smiled. He smiled back. No victory. No celebration. Only quiet understanding. Because justice had never been about proving who was right. It had always been about becoming worthy of the trust others placed in you. The end.